Hello children, it's Mr Tharia here. Now today's assembly is to wrap up the value we'll be looking at all term, which is about courage or being brave. And the assembly today, the title I've got is having the courage to do the right thing. And I'm going to tell you a little story that happened to me where I didn't do the right thing and how I felt about it afterwards. So my first slide is to go through a list of different mistakes we've made, example mistakes. And I want you to have a think about which mistakes you think are worse than others, okay? So I'm going to show you the list of mistakes and tell me or have a think about each of the mistakes and see whether any have applied to you in the past, okay? So the first thing I want to do is get my screen to work. I got 3 calculations wrong today. So there's a mistake, and we've all been in the situation, I'm sure, where we've been given a page of maths to do and you've got some calculations to do and you've got some wrong, okay? Another mistake might be that I forgot to put my name on the top of my worksheet, which I'm sure some teachers can get very cross with because they need to know who's done the work, and especially when they're giving you a piece of paper to do some work on. You might have made a mistake when you've got mad and hit your friend. Think about how you feel when you've done that. You might have made a mistake where you didn't listen to your mum or your dad or your carer and therefore forgot your lunchbox for the day. That's another mistake, isn't it? I'm sure you've been in a situation where you might have forgotten something from home when your parents have reminded you to take something in. Another mistake might be that I laughed at my neighbour's drawing. It can be a bit mean, but you might have laughed at somebody's drawing, and again, think about how they might have felt with that. Another mistake might be that you didn't cross the road properly after school last night. Okay, and that can be quite a serious mistake, isn't it? If you nearly get hit over by another vehicle, that would be quite serious indeed. Another mistake, and I'm sure this would be pretty up there with my household, if I spilled blackcurrant juice on the living room carpet. So that's another mistake. I lost my library book. Let's have a think about that as a mistake. And the last one, which I will go into a little story with you about in a moment, is I broke someone's clay model and let someone else get the blame for it. I'll give you a little chance to look at those various mistakes that I've just randomly put on the screen for you and think about which mistakes are worse than others. If I asked you to rank them from the worst mistake to the least worst mistake, think about which mistake you would put as the worst mistake. And when I've done this assembly before, a lot of you say, well, I think it's, like the crossing the road is, quite a serious mistake because it's a health and safety issue there, or getting mad and hitting your friend. That's something we is pretty bad mistake because, often has bad consequences if you've hurt somebody, and it's not very good for the other person you've hit, is it? Whereas things like getting calculations wrong and not putting your name on top of a worksheet, there might be mistakes, but you can learn from those mistakes, especially the calculations. We wouldn't expect anyone to get 100% all the time in any of the maths they do. And actually, a really key important thing about learning is to make mistakes. We actually only really learn when we've made mistakes and try to put it right the next time. So it's actually quite important to make mistakes. So not all of them are bad, but I just want to look at this last one. And I put this up because this happened to me when I was about 7 or 8 years old, when I was at, in fact, I might have been at infant school, so I might have been younger than that. It might have been 6 years old, might have been in year 2. So a long time ago now. And I want to tell you the story because it was a mistake and I didn't own up to it. So I'll just tell you the little story behind it. So I was, as I said, I was about year 2 child, and maybe a bit older. I was at primary school anyway, and I remember that we had made some clay models, and the clay models were being left to dry somewhere in one part of the classroom. And the teacher that we had at the time was quite a strict teacher, and I was a bit nervous, and I always wanted to be seen as doing the right thing all the time. And I was a bit of a goody two-shoes. I really wanted to do well for the teacher. And the teacher left the room for a moment, and a couple of children decided to get out of their seats, including myself, and go and talk to their friends in the classroom. And I remember going over to the other part of the classroom and having a conversation with a friend of mine. And as I was talking to my friend, I was picking up the clay models that we'd made that day, and I was fiddling a little bit with them. And as I was talking, and what happened was the handle of the jug, I think, came off in my hand, and I was really embarrassed. So I just left it, put it back, and I quietly walked back to my chair, and I sat back down. And then the teacher came back in, and I just didn't say a word. I thought, gosh, I hope nobody will notice that I've accidentally broken somebody else's fantastic clay model. It wasn't mine, it was somebody else's. It was actually a really good one as well. And then later that day, the child found their broken clay model and they got really, really upset by it. And I was really upset that they would find out. And the teacher got really cross and said, right, does anyone know anything about this broken clay model that was somebody's broken? And nobody owned up for it. And I didn't own up for it. And I should have done. And in fact, somebody said they spotted another child, not me, another child that was hovering around the clay models. And this child got the blame for it. I can remember his name. His name was Nicholas. And I remember letting him get the blame for it. And he said, no, I didn't do it. And for some reason, he did get the blame for it and he was punished for it. And I felt absolutely terrible. And that guilt has stayed with me all these years. And I'm 51 now, and that was a long time ago. And that was a mistake that I made, and I didn't own up for my mistake, and I should have done. So this little message for you in this assembly is that if you make a mistake, don't be afraid if you made a mistake. Try and own up for the mistakes that you make. So my next slide really is about thinking about how you feel when you make a mistake. I've been in a situation where I ask people to do things that they feel nervous to do. So for instance, I remember in a gym club, I might say, oh, let's do this forward roll, let's do this cartwheel. And the child may get really nervous about doing it and they may get upset about it. And they may say, oh, I don't want to do it. I'm worried. And I say, well, don't worry, I can help you through it or whatever it might be. But they then might get really upset because they feel that they're going to look foolish or they're going to make a mistake. And it's okay to feel like that sometimes, but you shouldn't let that stop you having a go at something. So it's really important that, you don't let the fear of making mistakes stop you from doing something. So what do we do when we make mistakes? We do sometimes what I did. We pretend it wasn't us that made the mistake. We perhaps brush it under the carpet or we don't own up to it. And that's not good for us because sometimes we do need to own up to things. We need to accept we made a mistake and we need to learn from that mistake. So two very important things, really. My next slide really is a poem which I put up, and I wanted to share it with you because it really meant a lot to me when I read this, and I thought of my own situation that happened to me when I was younger. So I'm going to read it to you and have a think about whether this applies to you. Sometimes you know that something is wrong and you don't really know what to do. If you tell, they will know there's a snitch in the class and they might find out that it's you. Sometimes belongings go missing. You might know who the thief is, and so, do you quietly tell the teacher or simply pretend you don't know? When you do something stupid and you're feeling ashamed, don't sit quietly by and let others be blamed. And when you're confronted, it's very unwise to start making excuses when you know they are lies. And I read that poem and I thought I must share that with you because sometimes we don't do the right thing because we're worried about looking stupid. We're worried about being called a snitch, or we're worried about, feeling ashamed or feel guilty, or we try and make something up. But it's really important that we have the strength within ourselves to own up when we've done something wrong, to not be afraid to make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes in our life. And it's important that when you do make a mistake, you own up for it, take responsibility for that mistake. But more importantly, you try and work on improving so that you learn from your mistakes. So if you get your 3 questions wrong in the maths, it's not the end of the world, but you just need to work on how you can improve that next time. If you spill black currant juice on the carpet, it's important to say sorry and, you might have to clean it up. But you'll know for the future that it's something, you won't do again, or you try not to do again. Forgetting your library book, not taking your library book back, well, it's a mistake, but you just need to perhaps set a reminder next time so you learn from that mistake. Hitting a friend when you get angry, that's quite a big mistake, but as long as you understand that we can't do that going forward and you apologize and you say, sorry, I made that mistake, and try and think of strategies to help you prevent you doing that in the future, then you've learned from that mistake. So there's lots of mistakes that we make. It's quite human and normal to make mistakes. It's also part of learning, which is also normal and important. But as long as we learn from our mistakes and don't be afraid to apologize when we know we've done something wrong. But my advice is when you've done something wrong, you need to own up, not blame anyone else, and just accept you've made a mistake and you'll try and put it right. So another little slide now, I quite like this one. We don't make mistakes, we only have happy accidents. So think of any mistakes might be a learning process. So I think sometimes, I can't remember which famous musician it was playing something and they made a mistake and it actually became part of a very famous song in the end. And the other thing is to err is human, to admit it, superhuman. What that means is to err is when you make a mistake. To be, to not be perfect is human. We're not all perfect. We make mistakes. To err is human. But to admit it, to admit that we're not perfect is superhuman. So again, we've got to accept that we're not going to do everything perfectly every time. So don't be a perfectionist because you will be disappointed. You're not going to get everything perfect all the time. And admit it when we get things wrong. Really quite important. Have the courage to do that. And my last slide really is a phrase here. It's easy to stop making mistakes. Just stop having ideas. Now, that's a bit tongue in cheek. What that means is if you don't want to make any mistakes, just don't have any ideas. But that's not good, is it? We have to have ideas. We have to put ideas forward to move forward in life. So sometimes you have to make mistakes to learn from them, to improve on things. Anyway, children, I think that's it. My last slide is a reflection, really, which is 3 things. Think about times when you found it hard to do what you knew was right. How did you deal with it? So there might be times in your life where you have to make a choice and you either make the right choice or the wrong choice. And how do you deal with making the right choice? So if you know somebody is perhaps upsetting somebody or bullying them, the right thing to do is to try and help them tell a trusted adult to get it sorted. If you ignore it or you don't want to confront it, that's not always the right thing to do, is it? In fact, it's not the right thing to do when it comes to bullying. Second thing to think about the times when you knew you were doing something wrong. Have you said sorry to the other person? So that example about when you've hit at your friend because you got cross with them or something, or when you've laughed at somebody's drawing. Have you ever tried to put it right and say sorry to the other person? And that's really key. My third reflective point is think about the times when you did the right thing and how proud you felt when you achieved it. And just to finish my own sort of life story, as it were, I do remember finding a wallet in the street, and I could have kept the money and kept the details of that, but I did the right thing. I took it to the police station and handed it in, and the owner was reunited with that person's wallet, and the person rang me to thank me for being so honest and kind and thoughtful and making sure the property got back to the right owner. So is it really important you make the right decisions, make the right choices? And actually, when you do make the right choices, you do the right thing, such as owning up if you've done something wrong or accepting you've made a mistake, then you should feel proud when you've achieved that. So I want you to have a really, really restful half term. I know our teachers are going to have a nice restful break. Have a really good week off, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care, everybody.